Sausage.
Hello everyone, this is Attack the Backlog, the podcast where I, Mark Kuznez, tries to make a dent in their backlog one game at a time. This episode is all about Need for Speed Payback, a racing game released in 2017 that feels like it was made in 1917, not directed by Sam Mendes, who surely sends his regards to moi for the payback endured while playing Payback, also known as yet another Need for Speed game no one remembers because they all started blending together post Most Wanted, and even among the blended, Payback is far from the one most want to play. Let me preface all of this with something important. I am not a car person. I do not drive in real life, and when it comes to video games, I enjoy myself a racing game or two, but I am far from an aficionado and no David S. Pumpkin about how cars work. Don't expect any authoritative opinions about the mechanics of driving, handling, or anything else a car person would know. The extent of my knowledge starts and stops with gas means go, brake means stop, and to quote one Ian Malcolm,
oh, there it is. There it is.
So just keep that in mind as you continue watching or listening, or take that newfound knowledge as an excuse to Payback is a bad game. It doesn't start out that way, quite the opposite, but it slowly grows more and more tiresome the more and more you play. You see, Payback feels good, the driving feels good, it's immediately accessible, super forgiving, and incredibly inviting, which isn't true for many racing games. If you had some crayons and creative hands, you'd color me pleasantly surprised and filled with hope. However, said new hope wasn't meant to last as George Lucas struck back with a menacing face because as much as Payback gets the feel right, it's pretty much all downhill from there. Maybe the soundtrack is good and sure it looks fine and plays well, but since I was streaming the game, I turned the soundtrack off immediately in order to avoid copyright claims and the like, and because of this, I got to experience the story of Payback whether I wanted to or not. The story of Payback is... I don't fucking know. Despite hearing much of it, I didn't absorb most of it. It's so clearly trying to be Fast and the Furious mixed with a bit of Ocean's 11 that it never finds an identity of its own, and since it doesn't go hard enough in either inspiration's direction, what we're left with is a mostly dull story full of cheesy dialogue, the kind of cheese that's been left in the sun for at least a week, and a cast of characters you couldn't care less about. But then again, this is a racing game, so how important is the story? Really. And to that point, sans a few story-centric set pieces, it's all standard racing fare here. This includes regular races, off-road races, drifting races, drag races, and a bit of drug running and cop chases to round things out. There's nothing wrong with this in theory, but the crumbs of something more we get in the aforementioned set pieces makes it hard not to wish they didn't just go down the traditional racing route. It not only makes for a repetitive experience, but takes away from any potential the story had of being good, dumb fun, leaving it as merely dumb and very seldomly fun. But it gets worse. There are missing features one would expect in a racing game released in 2017 that are nowhere to be found, many of which would have made the game far more accessible than it is. I know I talked about how accessible the controls were at the beginning of this review, but that's where the accessibility ends. You can call it a crutch if you want, but it seems like having a rewind feature is about as sure of a thing as one can get in most racing games these days. Payback has no such feature. Now, admittedly, I'm not the biggest fan or user of said feature because I think it takes away from the challenge and flow of races, so it's not the biggest of issues for me, but it's still nice knowing it's there for those who want it, and in those rare cases where you make one little mistake at the end of a race and don't want to redo an entire race just because of one little fuck up, especially when, for most races in Payback, you have to win in order to progress. I hate this. I hate this because the difference between easy and normal is destroying the competition or being competitive enough to usually at least place, for me, the casual racer, but not guaranteed to win. I don't have a problem with placing. I like placing. I like when a race never feels too easy or too hard. Who doesn't? Normal achieves this most of the time. However, I play the game on easy because as much as I'd like to take part in competitive races, I don't like having to do a race over and over and over again because I fucked up and got second place instead of first. It's a very Ricky Bobby way of looking at things.
If you ain't first, you're last. You know what I'm talking about? That phrase is trademark, not to use that tradition to Ricky Bobby.
This is why the absence of a rewind mechanic is more felt than it might have been otherwise. But an even more glaring omission is the absence of any kind of reset system, sans when you crash in such a way that the game finally decides to reset you itself. This means if you miss a checkpoint, trail off the course, get spun out, or anything similar, you have to get back on track yourself because there's no dedicated reset button or a situational reset button that pops up whenever the game sees you're struggling in one way or another. Did you get stuck between two trees all Austin Powers like and wish you could just reset back to the track? Too fucking bad. This is mind-blowing to me. I can see not including a rewind mechanic because that's still somewhat new and, while nice for making a game more accessible, doesn't feel required for having a good time. The same can't be said for a reset system. Sometimes accidents happen. Sometimes the game bugs out. Sometimes you just get confused. Sometimes adds up to a lot of times, and being forced to completely restart a race because no reset system exists is infuriating. What makes it even worse is how bad the game is at telling you where to fucking go. Payback is the worst kind of racing game in this regard. It's the kind of racer that requires looking at the minimap in order to be sure of where you have to go. Sometimes arrows will pop up in the world, but rarely are they beneficial. More often than not, in-world directions show up in places where you literally have no other direction to go. I hate this. I hate this because it means I'm spending more time looking at a minimap in the corner of my screen than the game itself. It's like action-adventure games where you spend most of your time in some kind of funky detective mode. I don't want that, and the game shouldn't want that. A lot of work went into building the world, modeling the cars, etc., and I'd like to be able to both experience and appreciate all that work, but I rarely got to. Too often I was stuck staring at a map instead because, on more than one occasion, I ended up driving in the wrong direction because dumb me got distracted looking at the game. How dare I? When I knew damn well I should have been looking at the map instead. This is bad design. Not including a reset mechanic is bad design. Opting to not include a rewind mechanic is not bad design, but it is unfortunate design. Including only 3 difficulties with no way to fine-tune them or change the control scheme whatsoever is, you guessed it, bad design. Incorporating some weird card pack shit that feels very free to play for upgrading your cars is weird design. It's why design. So much of Need for Speed Payback leads to questions of why, exclamations of huh, and declarations of independence. Independence from spending any more time playing this game or talking about it because, while it may be worth $3 when on sale, it's not worth much more than that and definitely not worth your time. Anyway, that will do it for this here episode of Attack the Backlog. Once again, I am Marcus Nez. Y'all can find me on Twitter and pretty much everywhere at PXSausage. If you'd like to check out all the stuff I do and what have you, you can go over to pixelatedsausage.com/PXS and find all my links of import over there. And if you enjoy this here show or any of the stuff I do, you can support me and my nonsense over at patreon.com/PXS. Anyway, that is it. That is all. Again, thank you for watching or listening. I hope you enjoyed this here episode, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. So for now, adios, arrivederci, bye. Oh.
I think we lost the muscle. Mac?
Yep, that truck's all yours. You know the collector's gonna go mental when he finds out we took his new toy.
Payback, baby.